2006, or known as the end of the Great Moderation, otherwise known as right before everything sucks. You go to the store to buy a board game to play with your family. You don't know what game to buy. Fear not. The Monopoly Man steps in to help solve your plight by selling you a modernized take on Monopoly, their words, featuring inflation. A couple of months later, you return to the same store, and again the Monopoly Man sells you the same thing, but different. Not different like it's a different theme with a different gimmick. No, even better. It's the same thing with a different gimmick. Behold, the way of the future. Credit cards. Same great taste of inflation and elevated prices, and a newfangled way of digesting it. A calculator. Featuring our stars, Monopoly Here and Now, and Monopoly Here and Now 2, Electric Banking Edition Boogaloo. In all seriousness, I found these at my local Goodwill for $5 each, and I had to check them out. The irony isn't lost on me, considering these aged as poorly as the housing market did, but I think it's very interesting, and considering how many in my generation can't even fathom affording a house, now our favorite property buying simulator reminds us too of our unfathomable, without fathom fantasy. God, that was terrible. Back in the day, before most of the unique monopolies with their own special rules and such, there was classic Monopoly. It didn't matter what type of Monopoly skin it was the same gameplay no matter what. They even had Best Buy Monopoly. Why do you need that? I don't know, it's a whole thing. I wish I could own it. The main point is that it's simple and popular. In 2006, the Monopoly company decided to change things up with Monopoly Here and Now. The same standard variant of Monopoly, but with a modern facelift. In my opinion, a facelift that fails at being Monopoly and instead is something different entirely. The locations were voted on, chance cards, community cards were updated, the prices of money were inflated to meet our society's standard of living, and on top of this, spaces like luxury taxes were altered to become credit card debt. And at the core idea of the original concept of Monopoly, if you didn't know, it was originally a criticism of private monopolies and land ownership, as well as to promote economic theories. And Here and Now is the Monopoly that missed the point. With the alternate several spaces and changing locations to be with little similarity, it really loses the impression of forming a monopoly and becomes a wild dash through an overly inflated market to grab land wherever you can in random places. And things like the luxury tax, which was specifically to comment that even if you have way too much money, you need to be taxed for it, regardless of, how wealthy you are. And there were ways to get around this, and ways to get around jail time, for example. And changing luxury tax to credit card debt makes that commentary very shallow. It seems shallow, or even non-existent for Monopoly. And I'll circle back to this later because I have another point I want to touch up on that. But on top of this, the game modernizes the currency to showcase the economy, even though this highlights how big of a problem we already face every day in our own economy. This Monopoly reflects a mirror back at us. Remember the term Monopoly money? Well, in Monopoly Here and Now, the Monopoly money becomes Monopoly money, as it's inflated to 1,000,000% of its value to reflect the modern economic worth of our own currency. $1 becomes $10,000. And the game didn't need to do this. In fact, in the latest edition of Here and Now, they reverted it back to the same old currency system to show how unnecessary it was. But I'm glad it exists. And it doesn't help that there is a get out of jail free card that is literally a presidential pardon.
Drumstick, you are hereby pardoned.
If this was the modern day version of the game, that would be like every card. And I find it funny because there was only one card in the entire game. I checked both games that literally is just paying your taxes. There's only one of them. And it gets better, or worse, with the Monopoly Electronic Banking Edition. I guess I should better do something else now. Well, hey, Mr. Monopoly. What are you doing in my house? Oh no, I already have the Here and Now game. I don't really need another one. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Now you can play faster without cash with the new Monopoly Electronic Banking Edition. So whether your style is fast and furious or cool and calculating, how you play Monopoly is half the fun.
Times Square. In one hotel, 20 million. Pick, swipe, and pay, Dad. Fast and without cash. That's how I play. How do you play Monopoly?
AKA the same game. It's technically called Here and Now Electronic Banking, but as you can see, the box nor the manual makes any mention of the Here and Now series. Even though it's the same game, the board is the same, the houses are the same, properties are the same, chance cards are the same, it's all the same. The player tiles are even eerily similar to its slightly older counterpart. And I wouldn't have an issue with this, mind you, if it didn't release less than a year later. These games cost like $30 in release. What's the point? Electronic's main gimmick is that it consolidates its currency into the form of credit cards that have an electronic balance, a starting balance of 15 million. That can be increased or decreased with this electronic banking unit. And it's fun to use. What I find wild about the system is how ironic it is. So if you didn't know, these games were released right before the economic recession of 2008. The Electronic Banking Edition literally has the ability to go into debt with your credit card if you overspend. Coupled with inflation, I think that, honestly, Electronic Banking Edition really captures the mid-2000s and the vibe of the Great Recession better than any other board game ever. It's not a high bar, mind you. Nobody else tried, but you have to give props to them for making a truly modern 2000s take on economics, hyperinflation, overpriced homes, and debt. And it really encapsulates the looming 2008 recession quite well, even if they didn't know it was coming. This whole stylized credit card system really speaks volumes, considering the state and the common usage of credit cards in the latter half of the 2000s. Look it up. So in this aspect, it's a perfect time capsule for American consumerism. Instead of being a critique, it's really a dark, grim reality knowing what would come a year later. Oh, it got very dark there. At the end of the day, these are just two board games from a bygone era. They're reflections of each other cast in shadow by one of the worst economic disasters in recent memory for the United States. That being said, Monopoly rocks. Like this, it's like one of my favorite games. And like these games, I test them out. They are so fun to play. So pick it up at your local Goodwill if you find it. I'm surprised that I got both of mine in good condition. And I love smashing my girlfriend's ass at Monopoly. She sure does suck. Wait, can I put that in the video?